Good evening. Welcome to Athens City Council. Tonight is Monday, May 14th, 2007. This evening, City Council is going to be meeting in a series of about 5 committee meetings, starting with the Environment Committee. Environmental Committee Chair, Member Weil.
Okay. This is the Environment Committee. We have one item and maybe miscellaneous, I'm not sure. We have AP here, members of AP, doing follow-up of their service reliability improvements. And who wants to speak first here? Okay, state your name and association and...
Hello everyone, my name is John Buck. I'm Community Affairs Manager for AP Ohio, and thank you very much for allowing us to come before Council tonight. As you all well know, we were here last summer and went over some of our plans to improve service reliability in the city of Athens, and followed that up with a subsequent committee meeting a little bit later. And we just felt like it was perhaps time if we could come back and go over some of the things and where we stand now in that progress, and try to keep council and the mayor up to date on what's happening. So with that said, I'll go ahead and introduce everyone, if I may. Jeff Rennie is our corporate communications consultant. Don Stemple is the customer services account manager. Mark Gundelfinger, customer services manager. Tim Seifang is district manager. Steve Stanley in forestry. Rob Richardson is in engineering. And Mark Westfall is the local supervisor here in Athens. And with that said, Tim Seifang will give a presentation now, if you may. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Tim Seifang, and I'm the district manager for AP here in Athens. And what we wanted to do is come back and like John said, kind of update you on where we were on the plans that we shared with you last June when we were here. Brought a map of the city of Athens and how we serve it. And the city of Athens is served by 3 substations. It's Stroud's Run, which is up at Stroud's Run, the Clark substation, which is over on Clark Street, and Elliott substation, which is on Elliotsville Road, kind of behind the ridges. There are 12 circuits out of those 3 substations that serve the city of Athens. And about the best way to think about this is the circuits out of Stroud's Run serve the east and northeast part of the city. The circuits out of Clark serve the northwest side of the city, and the circuits out of Elliott serve the southern part of the city. I can take this down, put it back up if we have any more questions about that. Okay, go ahead. This slide right here shows the reliability as it stood last June when we were here. And we use a statistical number called SAFE, that how we evaluate the number of outages a customer sees. And what SAFE is, it's the number of outages, or the number of customers that experience an outage in a 12-month period, divided by all the customers we serve. So it's like an average. So for all the customers within the city of Athens, last year, on May 31st, looking at 12 months, the average customer had a SAFE of 2.97. In plain words, what that means is the average customer experienced a little less than 3 outages in a year's time. Okay? Exactly. When we were here, we had some plans that what we plan to do to make the reliability better, and I'm happy to say that we completed all that. Plus, we came up with a few more things to do as well. But we replaced a station feeder breaker, which is a circuit breaker. It senses a problem, opens up, tries to close back in. If the problem's going, you have a short outage, like a minute or less, but you don't have a sustained outage. We performed an inspection and repair on 5 of those 12 circuits. We cleared approximately 56 miles of right-of-way. We replaced 16 reclosers, and reclosers are a device like a feeder breaker. It's an automatic circuit breaker that again senses a problem and will try to open up and close back in, and it'll only give you a sustained outage if the problem is permanent. We replaced 135 cutouts, and cutouts are fuses. They're a one-time item. If something's there, it isolates the problem to the fewest number of customers, And the cutouts we replaced are those that we have identified as being more prone to failure. We installed 20 lightning arresters, and what they do, they're devices that if we take a lightning strike, they will try to contain that energy so it doesn't damage our equipment and avoids an outage for the customer. And we installed some additional sectionalizing on one of the Stroud circuits, 04. And what that'll do is you put these sectionalizing devices on there, if there is a problem, it limits it to the fewest number of customers affected. In addition to that, we built a new access road to a couple of the circuits on Stroud's Run. And these two circuits, 1 and 2, they come out of Stroud's Run, go straight across up the hill, through the woods, come back down on East State Street by Donwood Automotive. And when we have problems up there, it was really tough to get to. So we had this road built, so now if there is a problem, we can get our equipment up there and shorten the duration of any problem that would be up there. So with all of that put together, from 2004 through 2006, we've spent approximately $4 million on maintenance and improvements to those circuits. Next. Now this shows where the reliability is today. And where we're at for the city of Athens, it's 1.7. And so what that means is the average customer experienced a little less than 2 outages in a year's time. And you compare that to where we were this time last year, at a little less than 3. So we have made an improvement. So overall, Stroud's Run, we've seen an improvement in that reliability. Clark is about the same, but it was performing fairly well this time last year as well. And Elliott, we have seen an increased number of incidents on Elliott. There's 2 circuits out of Elliott. And there have been a number of things for that, but probably the biggest causes, we had some animal problems in the station, and we have some plans to do some things to address that. And we also had some cold load problems last February when we had the record cold temperatures. And we have addressed that. We've had to increase the capacity on one of the protection devices and some of the conductor out there. But that's already been taken care of as well. So what do we have planned for the future? We have the animal mitigation I was talking about in Elliott Station. And what that is, we call it a bus one-shot. If an animal gets in the bus, it'll try to clear that, like the reclosers and the feeder breaker I was telling you about. In other words, it'll open up and try to close back in. 95% of the time, that'll take care of the problem, and you won't have a full-fledged outage. We got more cutout replacements scheduled for Stroud's Run. We have inspection repairs planned for a circuit out of Stroud's and a circuit out of Elliott. We're going to do some recloser replacements on Elliott and Stroud's. We got more lightning mitigation planned for Elliott. We're doing recoordination on Elliott, and what that is the way we design the devices so they work in conjunction with one another. And again, the idea there is to isolate to the fewest number of customers that would be affected by any type of event. And we're also going to install additional sectionalizing on Stroud's 1 and 4, and we have more right-of-way clearing planned for the number 6 circuit out of Clark. So with that, if there's any questions, I can try to answer them.
There was a story, I think it was on the radio this morning about various right-of-way clearings. I don't know if you've heard the story.
That was Columbia Gas Transmission
Yes.
lines.
Okay. And so I was wondering, it said you cleared, almost 56 miles of right-of-way. Where was that? Whose property was it? How much?
Well, I'll tell you what, we
How
got
did you
Steve
have-
Stanley's our forestry person, and he's here with us
Okay.
tonight, so he might be able to answer that.
Want me to come out there? or-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions for me? Because I'll turn the podium over to Steve if you don't.
Well, maybe someone else does.
Debbie?
One of the areas of great concern for members of council were the frequent outages in the uptown area, particularly at the lower end of Court Street, and I've heard that you've made some specific upgrades in that area. Do you have specific information about the changes there in terms of less frequency of outages?
Where we're at? Where are we?
There were some problems with some transformers, along, like behind Casa Nueva.
Oh, yeah, that
in
was what brought us here last year,
Yeah.
actually.
So I know you've made some improvements. What have you done there, and what are you seeing?
That situation was very specific to one piece of equipment, okay? That was one conductor that we didn't have sized properly, and that, once we got the right size in there, that was that took care of the problem completely there.
Right.
And so there really is no capacity issue. If we've got the capacity to serve what's there, if somebody comes along and wants to add more capacity, we may have to build something else, but we do that. That's what we do. So we just need to know what the load is going to be there, and if you're adding load, we need to know about it so that we can size our equipment appropriately.
Okay.
Okay.
On this, the average outages, I'm just curious, are those reported, or do you have some equipment that mechanically, by computer, reports to you that they're outages?
Well, it's a combination of both, but by and large, it's when customers call us and say, I'm out. Well, we have programs that say, okay, we know where the next protective device is, and these are the customers that called us in this area, so we can project that it's going to be this device up here. So that's how we get the numbers of outages.
Okay, so if I call an outage, if you're calculating somehow that whatever area I live in, this number of customers had an outage also.
Correct.
And if it's not reported, if it just goes back on in a couple of minutes, is it ever
Yeah, and
counted?
I apologize. I should have said this from the beginning. I'm talking about sustained outages. If it's just where the power goes off and comes right back on, we don't really have a good way to monitor that at this point.
So how long is sustained?
Well, sustained sustained is, the definition of sustained is 5 minutes or longer, but our operations typically last about 10 to 15 seconds.
Okay, well, that's what I was wondering, what you were counting in there.
Okay.
5 minutes or longer reported.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's really my question was, what is an outage by definition? I think I discussed this with you last time, when it was anything over 5 minutes. Okay. And if there's people out there who don't know that definition and consider every time they have to reboot their computer,
That's right.
it's an outage.
That's right.
Just so you know. Okay. To Mr. Stanley's
Okay.
question, I guess, trees? Okay.
Just leave that map there. I'll use that. Me. We'll move it back up here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Stanley. I'm the forestry specialist for AEP in the Athens area. And I believe the question was, how many circuits did that 56 miles encompass?
How much right away?
No,
I think I'm.
Yeah, I think it was basically, I'm interested in how many trees you cut down, whose property they were on.
Oh, how many trees?
Yeah, roughly. And
well-
how much property, and whose property was it? That's
I can't tell you specifically where all the properties were. I mean, we have lines all over the city, and of course we're on city right of way, we're on private right of way. And as far as the amount of trees, I could go back and go through records maybe and give you an idea of how many trees we cut down or trimmed.
Is that something that they have to get permission to do? Is that something you get permission to do, or you just do it?
Well, what we try to do is notify the customers that we are coming in advance. And it could be anywhere from a month to 2 weeks in advance. We leave door hangers that explain to the customer what we're going to do on their property. And of course, if the customer's home, we will, make personal contact with them, explain the work that's to be done, and then if there's any questions, or they want to meet with me, then we do that.
Just in following up from this media thing that I saw, the width of the right of way, or the
Mhm.
clearing, there seems to be some issue with how wide it has to be.
Mhm.
And I guess I was wondering if people had complained about too much, too many trees being cut.
Yeah, I mean, people do complain, whether it's 5 feet or 20 feet, but we we like to get at least 20 feet because there's a lot of soft-growing trees in town that grow rapidly, and a lot of times we won't get back for 3 or 4 years to trim that tree again. So, you know, we have a lot of right-of-way to cover. Very few crews to do it. Yes.
Okay, Nancy? Oh,
Go ahead,
who's
Debbie's first.
I didn't-
Debbie's first.
Okay, what's wrong?
I think the case that came up was around an area where they cleared 100-foot right-of-way or something, and it is being addressed by, there's some state legislation being discussed. And I'm curious if you've had a chance to look at that, if that would affect your practices at all, if you have, you know, because it sounds like they were clearing a much wider right-of-way than you traditionally do.
100-foot right-of-way?
This was gas.
Yeah, they were
Columbus
gas
gas
lines.
Oh, okay.
transmission,
Yeah, that's a whole separate issue from what we do as a distribution.
Right.
You know, that's a transmission line that's that wide, so.
That was my question, too. They seem to hit on notification. Do you think it will affect you at all, this potential law, if it's expanded with the notification piece?
Possibly. I mean, you know, common courtesy is to notify people, obviously. I'm a property owner. I would like to be notified if somebody's going to be on my property. And few cases where the customer maybe doesn't get notified, maybe it's an emergency type situation or something like that. You know, obviously it's hard to avoid that situation, but you know, I understand where they're going with it.
I know we had a meeting after last year's about tree trimming policies. And you discussed, of course, the fact that you do notify people with tags. You have two different colors of tags. Correct me if I'm saying anything wrong here. One for removal of tree, the other one for trimming.
Yes.
You also mentioned the fact you do contact the homeowner, but really the lag time between contact and actual cutting may be variable depending on emergency situations in other areas. Okay, so therefore, there's no time, there's no real set time when you may show up, or Aspen may show up, and that's who you contract with.
Yes, Aspen.
Okay, may show up and start cutting.
Right.
And these are things I've heard as issues. I think with the tree commission that you met with that time, there are concerns about tree practices in terms of cutting, the style of that. I'm aware, somebody just pulled me aside and was pointing at some trees on Carpenter. I don't know if you're aware of the 2 pine trees on Carpenter between Congress and Court.
Yes.
Now, they'll probably never be a problem to you again, but they look very precarious where they are. Is that something you would remedy if those trees became unsafe, or is that something that's
Sure.
done with? Okay.
Yeah, we would, if the trees became unsafe, or a property owner, or
Came back
the
again,
city,
it's a problem.
if it's on city right away, you know, we would definitely look at it and discuss options.
Okay.
Sure.
And I guess the other issue that I seem to recall from last year was removal of debris. Occasionally sometimes happens, sometimes didn't, but most of the time it gets chipped, I understand. Or
Yeah, if it's in a maintained area, a yard or something like that, then we chip it. But if it's in a wooded lot or a non-maintained area, then we'll stack it beside the right-of-way.
Okay. I think the concern I was hearing on that, and it was particular to Fairview and Grosvenor, there's a walkway there, there's a stairway there, and there seems to be quite a bit of debris on that, and I think the concern I was hearing from those people were fire hazards in terms of all this kindling that's now been placed there.
Well, that area was non-maintained, so, I mean, we viewed it as, you know, stack it along the right-of-way,
Okay.
so.
Okay. Any other questions?
There was a hearing not too long ago with the AEP having a rate request in before the PUCO. I'm curious the status of that process. And that's probably somebody else's question, I'm not sure.
Not a tree question.
That'll be Mark Gundelfinger. I'll let him introduce himself.
Good evening. I'm Mark Gundelfinger. I'm the Customer Services Manager. I believe there was a reliability rider that we had presented to the PUCO back in January with the intention of additional monies being utilized for to address further reliability issues, which included putting on additional protective devices, more line maintenance, more tree trimming, and things of that nature. That reliability rider has been withdrawn as of, I think it was last week or the week before last. So that issue is at the for various reasons. Once they had further discussions with the PUCO and the Ohio Consumers Council and the AEP, we came to decide that it was more appropriate to withdraw that at this point in time, primarily because of some concerns with our rate stabilization plan that we have right now with our overall rates as we're going through this market development period for deregulation. So at this point in time, there will not be the reliability rider taking place this summer.
Great.
Since you seem to be cognizant of the rates and stuff like that, there was a couple other questions I wanted to pose to you. One being, there was a news release sometime in May about this green pricing option that was permitted from the, was it Consumer Council, Ohio Consumer Council? Do you know anything about that, or?
Yes, well, to a point, and John Buck may have a few more details.
Okay.
But, I mean, in brief, and John, let you correct me if I'm wrong, but in brief, it was an outcome of deregulation.
Okay.
Where it was also required to go to competitive bidding, and the Ohio Consumers Council basically brought that issue up with the Commission and the AEP a year ago, and after further review by the courts, it was agreed that they were right, that we did need to go through the competitive bidding process. Once they got through looking at that whole process and considering where our rates were today, the most appropriate way to handle that without an additional burden to our ratepayers would be just to focus on the green energy alternatives for an open bid. Is that anything more that you want to add to that, John?
Yeah, I got something to add to it. We are admittedly getting our hands around this.
Okay, yeah. You want to
I
come?
don't know if you wanted to mention anything about streetlights. I know, Mark, that's
Okay,
in this
yes.
category.
Okay, the other thing, and I want to try wrapping this up because I know we have more committees, and I'm notorious for running long committees, I guess. The other one was how to reduce rates on our streetlights. We're signing on to a Cool Cities resolution with the idea of reducing our energy consumption. At the same time, I believe one of the student senators just walked out, and she was concerned about increasing our street lighting at the same time. So we're talking about two different things at the same time here. Process for increasing street lights. So can you reiterate it? And the thing of can we reduce our total bill somehow?
Are you kind of fighting against yourself right
I
now?
know. I'm aware of the contradiction, and I'm saying it
talk to
both
the
ways
public
because
a
I
lot.
think both need to be addressed in some level.
As we have a street light count with the city of Athens for, I believe, approximately 700 lights, Don, is it correct?
Yes.
And at this point in time, and in looking to reduce street light cost, there are various sizes of lights, and with each size is a different rate. The majority of the lights at this point in time are the smallest with regards to wattage and lumens, and therefore the least cost. So there is
already there, in other words.
correct.
Okay.
There are some that could still be reduced in size as far as light output, but that would probably not be advisable considering where some of these lights are. They are through your main thoroughfares. It would reduce the lighting output.
Okay.
So unfortunately, the only true alternative that you have is actually reducing the number of lights themselves throughout the city.
Okay.
On the flip side, if there are some other areas that need more lighting for various reasons, we'll be more than happy to work with you, and we'll be more than happy to work with you in both regards.
Okay.
Whether it be wanting to further study where you might be able to reduce them or where you might be able to increase the lighting or switch it around.
I know about 2 years ago, I think the Student Senate put a resolution thing out with a whole laundry list of areas they wanted more lighting. And this was brought up to me this evening about, people feeling safe.
Right.
Citizens feeling safe. Okay.
It is for security, so.
Yes.
so-
Okay. I have no other questions unless somebody else does.
Is Alvy here to talk about that?
What?
Is Alvy McWilliams here to talk about trimming?
I don't know. Do you want to talk about trimming, Alvy?
I can say something briefly.
Okay. We had Steve Stanley here before, but come on up. Okay. No more questions for you. Thank you. Alvy? We just-
Sorry for, I'm Alvy McWilliams, and I am the chair of the Athens Shade Tree Commission. And we should say a brief thanks to AEP for a right tree in the right place planting project that happened about a year ago when there was heavy pruning happening on the east side, and Steve Stanley spearheaded that. Thank you. Those things are leafing out now, but some trees that were pruned in the process of that pruning on the east side are not in good shape. And one thing that the Tree Commission hopes to see happen in the future is that there be more adherence to what are called ANSI standards, American National Standards Institute standards on pruning, particularly for trees that receive a shave all the way down one side. And there is a tree that we're concerned about that I think you mentioned that's in the area of Carpenter in Congress, and it's in a backyard. Steve knows about this, and probably needs to be checked about its root system. But if you take half a tree down, that's a really big tree, it can start to tilt, and we think it may be tilting. So this kind of pruning practice on certain kinds of trees can create hazards, and that's one of our concerns. We look forward to AEP's doing more work with crews learning ANSI standards and applying them. I think things are generally improving, but there really was a lot of room for improvement after a couple of the pruning jobs that were done last time. So that's, are there
Any questions?
anything else?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to say anything else? But make it brief.
I think it's about 3 minutes.
Okay.
Again, we're still getting our handle around this green pricing option that we're talking about. Participating customers will have an opportunity to promote the development of renewable energy sources through the purchase by AEP Ohio of renewable energy certificates, or RECs, at prices determined through a competitive bid, which will be a regionally offered request for proposal. Renewable energy certificates are a renewable energy product that customers can purchase to reduce the environmental impact of their activities. An REC represents the environmental attributes, for example, avoided CO2 emissions that are created when electricity is generated using renewable resources instead of using fossil fuel sources such as coal, oil, and natural gas. Customers who sign up for this program would pay a small premium for an equivalent of a minimum of 200 kilowatt hours associated with AEP Ohio's purchase of renewable energy certificates each month. After the selection of the winning bid, customers will be informed regarding availability of the green pricing option via bill inserts, AEP Ohio website, press releases, and existing public outreach. The green pricing option is a voluntary market-based alternative to AEP Ohio's standard service offer. Customers may elect to purchase the green product pursuant to the tariff rider at any time after it is offered and for the life of the tariff rider. Green power is defined as service that must come from RECs from green resources located inside or outside of the state of Ohio. Green resources are defined as wind, solar, photovoltaic, biomass co-firing of agricultural crops and all energy crops, hydro as certified by the Low Impact Hydro Institute, incremental improvements in large-scale hydro, coal mine methane, landfill gas, biogas digesters, biomass coal firing of all woody waste, including mill residue, but excluding painted or treated lumber. Only green resources that have been brought into service on or after January 1st, 1997 shall qualify. RECs must be from green resources located in the region covered by the Reliability First Corporation. RECs can be sold separately from their associated electricity and thus enable customers to purchase the environmental attributes of renewable power generation independently of their retail power supply. In an REC deal, the power from the renewable energy facility is not physically delivered to the customer, but the environmental benefits created by the facility are attributed to that customer, directly offsetting the environmental impact of the customer's conventional energy use. All of AEP Ohio's metered customers, excluding percentage of income payment plan customers, will be eligible to participate in the green pricing option. The program will become available in several months. During this interim period, AEP Ohio will be conducting the RFP, executing contracts for the purchase of renewable energy certificates, preparing customer information materials, and preparing the final tariff for filing with the Commission.
Thank you. Any questions on this?
Okay, two questions. One is, if I understood it, that AEP would somehow purchase some green power and use it however you want, based on my paying for it. Right, it just goes into your power mass.
I believe that the PUCO kind of oversees the program, the way that's going to turn out. So they'll have a.
Right. But in other words, in my house, I won't have a green power source, but it will have gone to you to distribute somehow.
yes.
Okay, all right, and my next question is, do you have any idea how much this is going to cost? This is going to be double, or do you have any idea what green power?
I believe it's, I've heard the figure $5, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff.
And what is it now?
For 200 kilowatt hours, about $5.
What is it now? I don't have my bill in front of me, sorry.
For 200 kilowatt hours, Mark, what would that?
So we'll go from $1.60 to $5.
$1.60 to $5, that's what I wanted to know. So currently, I would pay $1.60, and this would be $5.
Probably above and beyond, I would say,
That's
$5.
considerable
Yeah.
difference.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Okay. I don't have any miscellaneous. Oh, Nancy, you have miscellaneous?
Two things. In the past, we've worried about the solid waste contract, and I learned last week, and I think some of you did, that the university signed with Athens County Solid Waste, and so our situation is secure for a while now.
What was the length of the contract?
3 years. And then the other thing is, I went out on Friday and asked, looking for Ed Newman, to find out where they were going to place the vessel, and it's going to be not where the existing compost heaps are, but instead it's going to be on the road that goes down by the dairy barn, turns right, and then it goes left again by the Redmen. Well, before that, there's a place that's a relatively stable landform, and that's where they're going to put it. So, isolated from potential noxious impacts on houses nearby with that location. Anyway.
Okay, and with that being said, the other thing we're talking about with Athens Hockman Waste District is to eventually put a hazardous waste pickup. Now that they're set with
Right.
overview.
You and I and Carol were working on that for fall, right?
Yes, for fall. And they will continue doing that now that they're settled in their
Right.
contracts.
Yes. And our financial situation will be that much more secure.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else in Environment Committee? Okay, it's adjourned. Thank you.
Now I'd like to call to order the City Services Committee. If you folks would like to go, I'll give you a moment. Thank you, Mr. Buck, as usual.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Meanwhile, Attorney Meek can come forward. Hope you have some maps for us. Good. I know. Just think of how much that costs. Yeah, if you'd rather sit at the table, that's okay. There's room for 3 of you going around, but
We're going to ask Debbie.
You just write none. It's like
That's what I did.
for the auditor, state auditors.
okay, so now that we're getting organized, when last we met, we heard from Attorney Meek, and we have the minutes in front of us. And a few things to review, since it'll come up later on. I think there was, in the comprehensive plan, there was strong support for, well, at least among some people, for not moving beyond the existing development. And so I guess it's an indication that we're considering this as an opportunity. And so the plan said one thing, and so, I guess that I'd like to see the maps and go forward. The rest of the questions that were raised in the paper are not germane. Just the size of the parcel, how much is Clomard potentially, what do we expect in the future, what are we signing on to, in other words. Thank you. Whoever's speaking, proceed. Tell us.
I am attorney Sierra Meek with Michael Nolan and Company in Nelsonville, Ohio, and I am representing, the firm is representing Holzer Clinic, as you said. I also today I brought with me the attorney Michael Nolan and Todd Fowler, the assistant administrator of Holzer Clinic, to help answer any questions that you may have. Last time we were here on April 23rd, you had requested a development agreement. I did provide that development agreement. It is in draft form, but we're working on that to make sure that the city and Holzer is on board.
And let's just say that I read Gary Hunter's email, and we'll be meeting on that sometime in the future.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. So that's good.
And we did submit our petition on May 7th. And then subsequently we received a request from council for other maps and information about our petition for annexation. And I've provided that to you here. What you're looking at first on Exhibit A is a proposed subdivision split that was submitted last Friday, May 11th, to the Planning Commission. This shows 3 tracts of land. The medical building that we're proposing would be within Tract 1. You see, Tract 1 is a 14.86 acre lot there. And it has the City of Athens Corporation line running through that tract. Exhibit B is the proposed annexation that we included with our petition, and it shows that we are requesting that we annex 45.612 acres into the city limits. That's from the corporation line to the east. And I just thought I'd go ahead and run through the maps, and then you guys can ask questions afterwards. The third is the Exhibit C, and it's the Clomar map. It's the map that was used before the previous owner, Hayes, began filling. At this point, this is the best map that we have. The Lomar has not been requested at this point, but we do have the Clomar in place at this time. And it does show where the flood limits are, and we can try to field some questions about the Clomar based on that. And then the last map is a site plan of what the Holzer Medical Clinic is to look like on that first track that we looked at on the first map. And it shows that the City of Athens Corporation line is planned. It will be right through where the planned medical building is at this time. So we're prepared to answer any additional questions. I think last time we were here, we also discussed the water and sewer capacity. And I don't know whether the development agreement gave you enough information for that, or if you had more questions. Okay.
What I was interested myself when I first saw it was Exhibit B, 65 acres is a fair amount of land. And so I was thinking, where exactly is it and how will it be used? What I can see on this in Exhibit B is that you have a substantial amount of what you call parcel number 3, having open space. A vast majority of it, only a small part up above.
That's correct.
Okay.
Actually, the medical building will be completely contained on Tract 1. Will not be on Tract 3 at all.
And so you imagine a separate and potentially a different development on 3?
On Tract 3. At this point, Tract 3 is undevelopable, and there aren't any plans at this point to develop on that property.
Okay.
It's mostly waterway, swampland type.
What we would call pretty damp.
Damn.
Yeah, you can see, if you put all the maps together, you can really see what you're talking about in there with the river. Go ahead.
Why do you want to annex all of track 3 if it's undeveloped land? I mean,
Undevelopable, yeah.
undevelopable. I mean, why?
We left it up to the administration.
Okay. And Rick, you suggested that the,
Right, I suggested that it be annexed just in the, if you ever want to, for any reason, in the future, extend the city limits in any way that way, you wouldn't have then this parcel that you'd have to go back and renegotiate to try to get it in. Plus, I thought that, I remember the situation of Days Inn. When I was on council and they went in for an annexation, they left a little bit of the property off. You want to see a sign out of our sign ordinance compliance? You go right there and you can see the sign for the Days Inn. So to us, to me, it protected us in two ways, because it extends all of our ordinances into the other tract, which is the potential, but it also does a possibility for future annexation if some years in the future anybody ever wanted to.
Next. We're through. Got it? Okay. Jim?
I just, on Exhibit B, that the land that we're speaking of, that it's proposed open space zone. So it could come into the city zoned open space, which is a positive for us. I mean, we would control it then, and it would be open space with no buildings on it, and anything that happened would be under our control.
Yeah,
Plus, it is basically wetlands, as they say, and we may want to enhance that somehow.
Yeah, it's easier to see when you have the maps, isn't it?
Yes, very. Thank you.
So we appreciate you bringing them. Any other questions? Debbie? We got
Jim
it, we just
covered it.
said about, so the development agreement would talk about the zoning open space in B3.
But that is another issue.
Right, and it's not coming up tonight, so that will be resolved. Any other questions? Take a look at your maps and see if there's anything else
So this,
that we want to talk about before we take a vote. Yes?
so the entrance will be actually right across the street from the, I think this was discussed as well as the
Yes.
traffic flow. So this is going to become an intersection. I'm looking at your last site plan for your building. So this becomes an intersection right there, where the 50
I know what you're talking
comes
about. You want me to
off.
address it, Rick? I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Todd Fowler, an assistant administrator with Holzer Clinic. When we looked at the property and began giving the site to engineers and allowing them to, if you will, play with it and come up with the best layout in their minds, they envisioned an additional access point. And I say additional because there's already one there. Another, second ingress egress. So some of our drawings still show that. We have gone to ODOT and in conjunction with the mayor's office have looked at the possibility of relocating the access. Being that that is limited access highway, you're only permitted to have one ingress egress in that stretch of road frontage. Our preference would be to have it located as you see in the map, but we don't know that we can do that or not. So it tends to stay in some of the maps. It's something we're still considering, but it'll be done to High Department transportation standards and any city curb cut and road standards that will be required.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that this is proposed location, right?
The location of the access point, the curb cut, is proposed, yes, but if it is not feasible, for whatever reason that may be, then we will be working on the current ingress-egress point that's there now.
Which is further to the west.
Mhm.
Okay. And I guess the question I have for Rick, if we annex this, do we take it over or not? I seem to recall or is this still ODOT property at this point?
No, it's still ODOT. They will still maintain their limited access right-of-way there.
And they maintain the road or not? We maintain the road at that point when we annex it.
They maintain the highway because it's a federal highway.
Okay.
In some of the cases there, we maintain the right-of-way, like for example, at Columbus Road, you see that fence line in front of Taylor Motors and such, and in front of WATH. That's limited access property. There's only one entry there, but we mow the grass in that area. And then there's other agreements with ODOT. Some of those, they take care of the entryways, some we do. It's a negotiated process with them.
Okay.
We haven't negotiated out there yet, so that's another one to...
Okay, so everything north of this lot line is still going to be outside the city. Is that the case?
I'm not...
Well,
the way ODOT usually looks at things is they go to the, if it is an existing street, I believe they're neutral from this, just the same as power companies, like electrical, AEP. It's just here, a substation doesn't vote in an annexation process, for example. So we would probably take the eastbound lanes, could potentially be ours, but they are right now up to a certain point. We're adding 600-700 feet, maybe.
Okay. Okay. I'm asking because I have two plumbers at OU that chase me down every time about the humps there on the slabs, and I keep telling them it's outside the city. So if this comes inside the city, they're going to be after me again, and that's what I'm trying to find out.
Right.
It's very personal at this point because they'll come in when there's a leak and start telling me about this while the leak's still happening. And, so that's why I'm asking. That's all.
That's part of the joy of public service.
I know.
Okay, other questions, Debbie?
Just a quick one in this discussion about the curb cut. This will be later down the road, I think, as plans are more developed, but obviously there'll be discussions with the fire chief about whether we need to have two ways in and out, just in terms of safety access. And all we're talking about right now is the resolution about which services we would intend to provide, which would be water and sewer and fire and police.
That's right. Using a development agreement, right? Isn't that what we'd say? Using a development agreement. That's what we would do. Is everybody ready to do a suspension on this because it's a 22-day window? I know. Thank our legislators.
What? No.
It's a 22-day window.
Next meeting.
Next meeting, not today.
Okay.
Are there any, Amy, questions, Carol, Jim, anybody? All in favor? Okay,
Who moved that?
thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have it up. I only have miscellaneous on mine. Actually, Ray called me and said that we need to redo the Fern Alley storm sewer, and at some point maybe we should be discussing how we want to pay for that. I think it's going to be substantial, and it's the next meeting I propose to talk about it, but you can be thinking about it. I think the cost of the engineering is pretty high already, and we don't have our full FEMA. I mean not the Richland, whatever the name of that area is. The let me see if I can pull it together. The I've totally lost it. Forget it. Think about it next time. For next time, think about Fern Alley and the storm sewer, which is the size of a truck, and whether it comes out of the sewer fund or if we should put a special assessment on is really what I would like to discuss next time.
Nancy?
Yeah.
Are you talking about, when you say Fern, you talking about...
Storm sewer.
Yeah, I know the storm sewer. Are you talking about starting at Court Street, going all the way down Fern, or going further upstream from there? 'Cause
Well, I think they're going to plan and see what they have to do. I think for sure down, but I don't know about the rest.
Okay. I just wondered.
All right. So I'm done. Let's think about it. Finance and personnel.
Finance and personnel. The first item on our agenda says staffing levels part-time. Last Monday, we introduced an ordinance, 5307, authorizing staffing levels for intermittent, temporary, seasonal, full, and part-time employees at the fire department. There were some questions raised. Since that time, I've talked to the personnel director and met with the mayor and the auditor, and the consensus has been overwhelming that we need to look at this whole staffing regulation. And what I just passed around is a quick proposal that the personnel director and the mayor put together this afternoon for perusal and discussion at some point. I'm going to suggest that I actually table this ordinance at the next meeting so that we can review
the entire part-time, intermittent, intern staffing level and pay rate situation. So that, at this point, that's how we're going to determine it, not look at individual department cases, but at the whole,
That makes sense.
the larger picture. Any questions about that? Also, there were some other issues that came up and some questions were raised. We talked about authorizing the mayor to apply for an emergency shelter grant through the Department of Development for Good Works Incorporated. And there were some questions about how is this emergency shelter utilized. I talked to Keith Wasserman, who is the director. In 2006, they provided 2,982 nights of shelter at their Timothy House shelter. Timothy House is actually the shelter that is outside of the city limits, the one on Central Avenue.
I think it's Hannah is outside, isn't it?
I thought it was the other way around.
Oh, okay.
Timothy is out and Hannah's on, I'm relatively certain, but we may be completely wrong. However, they have provided almost 3,000 nights of shelter for homeless individuals. And we have some statistics for so far in 2007. In April, they provided 378 nights of shelter. And so this is a very important grant. It would bring $58,300 to the Good Works program. Their budget is, in general, their proposed budget is $180,000. So they're still going to have to raise almost $120,000 to make this work. Mr. Wasserman is out of town tonight. He would be more than willing to come next Monday when we discuss this, when we read this for the second time, if there are further questions. And he would especially like to arrange for City Council and anybody else who's interested to make a visit to the shelter on an evening or an afternoon of our choice. So I'd like you to be thinking about that, and I'm going to poll you next week for some suggestions about when we might be able to do that.
We can make tacos again.
I'm sorry?
We can make tacos again.
Yeah. We have been there and participated
Some of us have been there.
in their meals the last time we made
Friday night
tacos, and we
suppers.
did learn that we won't do tacos again, I
Tacos
think.
again, never.
So, I'll ask you next week to come up and see if we want to do it on an evening or Saturday afternoon or something like that. So, any other questions about this particular grant? There were, also, the president of council, we had a representative from Tri-County Community Action who handles our fair housing grant, which comes through CDBG funds. And President Bias remarked that the literature that was being passed out does not indicate that within the city of Athens, a protected class is also sexual orientation. So I talked to the director of the program. They have just printed a whole bunch of literature, so they're not really going to be reprinting, but she has offered to insert an insert in everything that's handed out within the city, and they are just about ready to redistribute throughout the city. So as soon as they have that insert available and a packet, we'll get some samples and see how that's handled. So that will be dealt with. Paul?
I meant to actually, and I forgot this, to send her a copy of the our landlord lease agreement in terms of fair housing.
Okay.
Is it possible to get that sent, just so they can look at it and say how it matches with their fair housing brochure and information? I actually printed one out, and I know it's sitting on my kitchen table, but I didn't put it in an
I know
envelope.
it's got peanut butter on it.
Okay,
It's
well,
got peanut butter on it.
we can do that and get
Butter,
to the
I think.
correct people.
Okay.
get these?
And I have this, sure, take one and pass it around. Another miscellaneous item, I received a quick note from the auditor that we have received from the county auditor yesterday, property tax receipt information. Our property tax, is this for the half year?
Yes.
So far, it's $315,459 for the last half of 2006. And also our TIF, East State Street TIF collections were $275,703 and some cents. We have an appropriation for the East State Debt Fund of about 68,000. So we have 151,000 additional money that needs to be put in that fund. Is that the way I understand it, Auditor?
Yeah, there's several things that need to be done with that. Typically, we've been using that TIF money to pay down on the East State Street note, which is coming due July 11th.
So first we have to
Exactly.
appropriate it to the
We
debt-
need
to the
to
debt
transfer it from TIF and appropriate it in the East State Street Debt Fund. Not
And
to
then
pay
you
down on
had
that.
some information about some debt payments that are coming up.
Yes, we
soon.
have two of them. That's one of them. The East State Street note and the parking garage note are various purpose bond notes that are handled by our bond council, because East State Street is large, $2 million we owe. And so that has to go through council readings, and he needs to know how much we want to pay down before he starts that. So those are due July 11th. So he said if we start that through at our first meeting in June, then we're probably okay. So we just need to know about that. And as I said, we need to transfer that TIF money and then appropriate it. The other one that's due June 30th is, well, it's the Hocking Valley Bank loan that I took out 3 years ago to pay our sewer debt loans. If you remember, that was kind of an emergency type loan for $300,000. We've only paid $25,000 down on it in 3 years. I'd like council to consider paying more on that this year, bringing that down a little bit, since we've just in the past 6 months or so taken out 2 new Hocking Valley Bank loans, one in water, but one in sewer. So I request that be appropriated, and $750 to pay down on that. And I'd request about $50,000, and then see how much the receipts come in the next month. So it'd be by the end of May. So something to consider. If the money is there, I'd like us to pay down on it. The interest is going to be about $12,000 anyway, $10,000.
So these
And
are,
that's already there and appropriated, actually.
what, for this last?
In the sewer debt fund.
Okay.
Yeah, we have about $13,000 appropriated for that interest, so, already.
Paul?
Didn't we have some kind of pay down resolution a couple of years ago about how to do this? Or is that, I'm thinking of some other fund.
That was something else. I think,
Okay.
are you thinking about the $10,000 that council borrowed from CAP to pay on sewer?
I thought it was a sewer
Well, that's our
fund.
payment,
Yeah.
but they borrowed $240,000.
And I thought we were supposed to come up with a payment plan somewhere along the
We
line.
did, $10,000 a year.
Oh, then that's what we're talking about now.
No.
No, that's another fund. Okay.
Repaying ourselves.
We were, yeah. and I
That one is
mentioned
due
it-
once a year in December.
Okay.
$10,000 per year we pay back to CAP from the sewer fund.
Okay. That's
We're
what I'm
intending
thinking.
to talk about sewer rates next time when we know how much Ray's been looking into with FEMA and Rose Fernalley. So raising the rates or reborrowing or something.
Okay.
So I've been he's been talking to me already about it.
Okay, so we'll talk about this
Next time.
soon.
Very
And we'll-
soon.
We'll have something by,
But you can do the 50,000 right now because it's appropriated
but we'll hopefully deal with it in a larger
in a larger context.
context. That's the word I think.
Yeah, our
Well, I
bond
couldn't
council would
remember,
like to know by the end of next
Columbus
week.
Road.
So,
Okay.
because he writes the ordinances. And the parking garage and the East State Street debt are two separate ordinances, and then there's a third one that combines them. So for him to write those, get them to us, and go through council, he needs the amounts. So I'll be asking for these transfers and appropriations from the TIF money for East State Street. Parking garage already has money in there to pay that debt.
Just to clarify, the $13,000 is already appropriated, so you would need an additional appropriation if we wanted to pay down $50,000
For the
on
principal, right. The 13 will cover the interest, and so the additional appropriation, and we do typically, wait from year to year or see how much money we've collected, and I think we could pay down on that debt.
In parking garage,
There's already enough money in there. It's close, but I think we've appropriated almost exactly what we need to pay that and the interest.
And
then there's a small amount for fees for the bond council.
We just talked about that. So.
It's about $3,700 max, more like $3,500.
With fees.
For fees.
Just to be aware that these are going to be 3 payments that will be coming up soon. But we can do it.
Your bills today.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's my miscellaneous. Oh, except for the mayor, yes, sir.
Except for me. In the recreation fund, we have 2 items.
Oh.
One is we received a donation for the Ralph Dalton Field from his family of $11,000 to do improvements at the Ball Diamond. And so since they've already sent us a check, I'd like to appropriate an additional $11,000 so we spend that donation on their intended purposes. I'll get over with Kevin and make sure capital limits and everything else as to how much in 300 series and how much in the 500 series on that. The other thing is we did receive approval from the State Controlling Board for the release of $75,000 of the I guess earmarked monies in the state capital improvement budget for the soccer complex. We should have that check by the end of the month. We have we've received $10,000 from O'Glennis and have a 2-year commitment for another $10,000 the next 2 years. That should be coming in July, the $10,000 payment. So we have $105,000 in hand or promised from O'Glennis. So we'd like, we need to get started on this so that we can do something in at least by the fall, at latest. I think the council's already done an ordinance authorizing for the $75,000 and all this, which was necessary to get that drawdown. I know there's been some discussion that because a large part of that will be going for restroom facility, but we, have okays from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. It meets the minimum requirement. It has to be less than 500 square feet, and it is, and it has to have no impact, and they've ruled that it doesn't. I know you've had plans in the council office for a couple of weeks on that. So we need just to get going on if we're going to do it.
And can your office or Kevin's office provide us with that information about the review of the plans for the restroom? Because I don't think we'd seen that review yet.
Yeah, we wanted, and I think Debbie suggested flow-through. I mean, basically.
And I thought that was part of the plan.
If it is part of the plan, okay, but I haven't seen it. I just want to make sure it's there.
Yeah, we've had plans in the council office, but we really hadn't had a discussion about it, so.
Okay.
I don't know whether that comes under me or somewhere else, but.
Yeah, we left
somewhere
it.
else. We need to just have that discussion.
Well, it is and it isn't, because it's going to be on, like, stilts, columns. But you're going to be at the height of the bike path, because if you went up to the 100-year floodplain and the foot above, you'd be 5 feet above the bike path. Right. Then to do a ramp, ADA-wise, to get from the bike path to that, you'd be going out a few hundred feet. So it's still technically within the 100-year floodplain, because we'll be at the height of the bike path. So that'll be a smoother transition for people using the bike path also that want to use it versus a soccer player. So you're going to be in the 100-foot. The rule there is that you make it as flow-through as possible, and that you have to be under 500 square feet, and we're at 360-some square feet. So it's not the grandiose plans that some of the soccer committee had some years ago that showed the pavilions and the stands and all the other things. It's got a strong dose of reality in it. But if there's other details, I had Jeff Maiden do the hydrology and do all of that work on it, so if you need additional information, we'll,
Good.
we have it.
I think Carol's going to bring that up in the near future. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Anything else miscellaneous?
Nope.
We are done.
Okay, we're going to begin the Planning and Development Committee. The item on our agenda is to discuss the B2D rezoning request for the lower end of Court Street. I have a couple documents I'm just going to go over. I passed maps of Uptown around to council members. I have extra copies of the map here for anyone who wants it, and I have a couple extra copies that compare the differences between what's allowed in a B2D and a B3. I only have 2 extra copies of that. If it looks like President Bias wants one, so y'all are going to have to fight over the other one. I'm going to go over briefly the clarification that we got from the Planning Commission. Someone came to the Planning Commission and asked for clarification about their recommendation to us, and they sent another memo to us. Council members did receive a copy of it. I don't know if everyone has that in front of them tonight, but so I'll just say that the Planning Commission confirmed that it was their intention to include all properties that are right on Court Street, and that when they said that we should use our discretion about where to draw the line, they meant reaching out to include potentially other properties that are not actually abutting Court Street. So that is the Planning Commission recommendation. If we would want to do something different than that, we would need a supermajority on council to do that. So that's the recommendation we have before us.
You need 4 votes to pass it, right?
To pass it the way they recommended it, with the discretion along where Magic Video and Stevens is, those kind of questions. I also want to mention that I received a letter, I think everyone received a letter from someone, from Pamela Rowland, who said she can't be here tonight, saying that she supports this. I think there are several issues in front of us. I think, first of all, whether or not we want to proceed, if we want to proceed, where the line should go. And I think that there are some related quality of life issues that are of concern to a number of people that we need to consider as we discuss this, at least to include parking, noise, and increased residential density. Those are the things that I've been hearing from people about, and I think other members of council have been hearing about that as well. I did a little bit of research just to see how much of an issue the parking was, because that seems to be one of the controlling factors in terms of increased residential density and possibly increased noise. And I thought maybe we would find that we're only talking about a handful of parking spaces that are currently required to be dedicated for commercial use. In my conversation with Steve Pearson, he went over all the different parking that is currently required to be used for commercial purposes, and it looks like it's in the neighborhood of 70 to 75 parking spaces. So just to quantify what we're talking about in terms of the possible spaces that could turn over for residential use if they were no longer required to be used for commercial purposes. And I can go through where we think those are if you want, kind of business by business, but I don't know if you need me to do that. And yes.
Are these the numbers on the boxes here? Is that what I'm looking at on the map that you passed out just earlier? Are those actually the numbers of the...
I'm guessing those are addresses, but
okay.
I'm not sure.
Well, wait a second.
No?
No, because you have 7, 8 on the same side of the street. So
I'm not sure
11,
what the
12.
numbers on the map
Okay.
are.
I was just wondering.
I believe that map may have been related to the historic district designation.
Okay.
I think that.
Yes, you're
that-
right.
that may be
I'm
where
looking
that
at the
came
old
from.
downtown historic registry. Okay.
Okay.
I got that map too.
Okay. I know there are a lot of folks who want to talk to us, and I wonder if we should let people do their 3 minutes now before we start our discussion, just so we can hear what things people are concerned about. Because I know that the Chamber of Commerce is here, Mike Smeltzer is here, and nearby neighbors in the community are here. So I'd like to hear from people before we launch into our discussion and start making any decisions. So whoever would like to talk to us, you'll need to come up to one of the microphones.
Oh, nobody wants to talk.
Come
Let's
on,
just go
Larry.
ahead.
Actually, we'd rather defer to see what, really our only comments would be if council did not accept the recommendation.
Well, then get up here and tell us.
Really have no comment.
Come
Your
to the-
discussion. Okay?
Come to the table and talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll be happy to speak. My name is James Sillery. My family has lived on the north side for 32 years. I was a member of the zoning board for 10 years, sometime during the 70s and 80s. Parking was a big issue then, and it remains and probably is a bigger issue today. Now, the original zoning code that was passed in 1969 in dealing with the Uptown Business District contained the provision that off-street parking requirement for principally permitted uses may be eliminated if there exists within 500 feet of the property line improved public parking, meaning the parking garage. And that issue came before the zoning board on a number of occasions. And frankly, with that 500-foot line and the B2D designation at that time, there were not very many businesses outside the 500-foot line. And it was difficult, frankly, for the board in those situations to deny something based upon parking. But in fact, that was the rule. And it's a good rule because I think that the council that passed the rule at the time understood that the further away a business is from the parking garage, the less likelihood somebody is going to use the parking garage if they're going to go to that particular business. Frankly, I'm opposed to this change because I don't see any benefit to the city, and I certainly don't see any benefit to the North Side neighborhood. There are a number of present businesses that presently provide parking for their commercial purposes. You've got the Historical Society. You have Cornwell's Jewelers. I'm sure that Courtside Pizza does, although if you can tell me where their parking spots are for their pizza place, I'd like to know, because I can never find a place when I try to go there. And then, of course, there's Brony's at the far end. We don't know what the situation is going to be on Court Street 10 years from now. But if you look back 10 years at what it was and look at how much has grown there, the apartments, Courtside Pizza, Brony's, a law office is now a jewelry store. Certainly the next 10 years is going to bring more change. And the Historical Society, what if they moved and a business goes in there and decides, well, if we no longer have to provide parking for commercial purposes, so we'll expand the business, eliminate that parking, add more people in the building, but take the parking away. Cornwell's Jewelers, they could decide, hey, we'll tear our building down, put up a 3-story building, have our nice jewelry store on the first floor, eliminate customer parking, and have student rentals on the second and third floors, and have the parking solely from them. And so we continue to increase the density of the area and decrease the parking. And frankly, that is not good for the city. And it's certainly not good for the North Side neighborhood. I was told that Courtside and Brony's would become non-conforming uses if this change took place. I'm not sure that I agree with that, but Steve Pearson told me that. And that would really be ironic, because if council would have made this decision 5 years ago, then according to Steve, neither of those businesses could have gone in there. But the real irony would be that if you grant this as it is, if you go along with the Planning Commission as it is, and I don't see anything from the Planning Commission about any recommendation about parking in here and what to do, but you would be grandfathering in a non-conforming use that would allow them to expand that non-conforming use by eliminating the parking. And certainly once you give up that parking, you're never going to get it back. And as difficult as it has been for the city in finding each individual parking place, and there's some places where they have parking where frankly I don't think it's safe for them to have parking. It's certainly, no matter what you do, keep the parking that's already there. Now Debbie mentioned noise, and I've lived in my present house for 18 years, and I have 2 bedrooms on the south side of the house. Given the changes that have taken place and the businesses that have gone in, there are probably, in the warmer times of the year, 3 nights a week that we cannot use those bedrooms with the windows open. They don't have a right to take away the use of my house. I don't take away their rights to their business. They certainly shouldn't be able to operate a business in such a fashion that takes away my use and enjoyment of my house. So I urge the council not to go along with the recommendation. These lines have been drawn since 1969. I think they've served us well. It provides for parking for commercial purposes. That parking ought to remain. But no matter what you do, again, I'd urge you to keep the parking.
Thank you. Is anyone else wishing to speak to council? Please. Oh.
Michelle Draybold. I live on North Congress. I would just like to add a little bit more to more of a human element of the changes that have occurred at the end of North Court with the additional businesses that have opened in the last 5 or 6 years. In terms of the density of people who are milling in the street, on the sidewalks. Saturday night I encountered a remote-controlled small Hummer on Carpenter Street. It's a zoo. On many nights of the week, there are many people roaming around down there since those additional businesses have gone in. I'm concerned, if you move the line away from State Street, that, again, many of the things that Mr. Sillery talked about will continue to occur, which is further, we don't live in a flat Kansas town here. And all the noise just wafts right up the valley, up the hill. So there is that noise issue which comes with density. I'd also like to advocate for the Carpenter Hall people. Occasionally we do hear their concerns and the issues they bring out in that residential apartment building there. And that's another concern, because I think if you move the zoning farther down in what's proposed, I think that affects those people even more. And they don't have a lot of advocates for their positions and their way of life there. So I really, as Jim said, urge council to really consider, with some foresight and some thinking here about what we're looking at in terms of planning. It looks nice on a piece of paper to have your zoning lines and colors all match up and come right down your historic business district. But in the end, I think the human aspects of this and the results for many of the folks, students included, is not going to be helpful for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Please.
Christine Chandler, 4th Street. I would strongly ask that council consider the solidity of the community in the long term as a balanced community made up of people who are in a variety of wage-earning categories. Not all of us have the opportunity or willingness to move outside of the city. Some of us are hardcore and have chosen to be an integral part of the living community of the actual close-in area of Athens. My family has been there since 1988. We chose to move onto 4th Street from out in the country because there was a wonderful combination of student interplay, internationals who we were able to get to know and enjoy, but also that wonderful community base of people who have been here. For me, it's been since 1968. Athens is a chosen home for me, not some place where I was born and never made up my mind to leave. And I think a lot of us are in that category. We've come to Athens because of what we have come to love about it, its intimacy. I think when we turn away from the community people and cater to the incomes of large earners and people who are in a position to and of a mind to live outside of the community and use it in, I hate to say this, but it's a real parasitic kind of way, to take that downtown area and use it in a way that it was never meant to be used. I mean, the downtown was never meant to be used as a major living area for people of the community. And because of that, it will be one more nail in the coffin for those of us who do enjoy being able to live close enough in to walk to events and facilities, stores that we love uptown. So I would like to ask you to help maintain the balance between this wonderful community university influence with the community. And I strongly disagree with what Terry said today, Terry Smith said today in his Wearing Thin column. I feel very strongly that those of us who are advocating this kind of situation and turning down that zoning change are indeed asking for balance. And so it would be very much appreciated if you would consider that balance when you make up your minds as to how you plan to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to council? Aaron?
My name's Aaron Leatherwood. I live on the north side, about 3 or 4 blocks north of Court Street, and I'm the chairman of the Athens Near North Side Neighborhood Association. I've reviewed this proposal from the Planning Council, and I am concerned that along with the proposal we have a recommendation, but I don't see a lot of analysis to support that recommendation. If we take the position that it's the Planning Commission's responsibility to be making this kind of recommendation, I would expect to see some analysis as to why this is perhaps a good recommendation, and that is not there. I'm concerned that we're contemplating these kinds of changes to our zoning districts prior to getting in place a city planner. We know that we need a city planner. We are trying to hire a city planner. And yet we're taking the kinds of steps, or we're contemplating the kinds of steps that you would really follow after you've discussed these with the city planner, and after you've had some time for a city planner to actually look at the city and think about what makes sense for us. I've talked some with Steve Pearson. Steve Pearson has suggested to me that there is space available in the parking garage. Either there is or there isn't. If there's not space in the garage, then we shouldn't be doing this at all. If there is parking space in the garage, then we should be asking ourselves, why is it the case that there's space available in the garage, and yet still it is very difficult to get on-street parking a block away on the upper end of Court Street? And if we can't get parking on the upper end of Court Street, because just about every time I drive down the upper end of Court Street I'm looking for a space, while presumably just next door there's space available in the garage, why do we think that people at the lower end of Court Street are going to use the garage when people at the upper end of Court Street are not using the garage? Now, if we were to go ahead with this change, what would that mean? If we were to go ahead with this change, it would mean that all of a sudden we would be allowing more activity on the lower end of Court Street. And as we allowed more activity on the lower end of Court Street, as the parking needs increased and as the amount of available space decreased, people would have a choice. They would be saying, okay, I'm on the lower end of Court Street, where am I going to go park? Am I going to go up to the garage where I have to go through various levels of the garage? I'll be looking for a space, maybe I'll find one, maybe I won't, and then once I find one I get to walk down to the lower end of Court Street, or am I going to drive up Congress and down Grosvenor and over to Franklin? Am I going to look in the residential neighborhoods first because they're closer and they're free? I see this proposal as being about making an already scarce resource in the residential neighborhoods even more scarce, and this starts to affect our ability to do various things. We've been looking at parking overall in the residential neighborhoods. If we all of a sudden are using our residential neighborhood parking spaces for business, it makes it a lot harder to do things like implement a hang tag system. Debbie had mentioned earlier the possibility of 70 to 75 spaces going away as a result of this. I recall around 20 years ago when Sarah Hendricker was the mayor, and she had looked all over town and come up with something on the order of 200 spaces throughout all of uptown, and that was a big difference. I remember all of a sudden, at the margin, 200 spaces, that's a lot of spaces. All of a sudden, in areas where you couldn't get spaces, all of a sudden, sometimes you could get spaces. It made a difference. Now, 70 to 75 spaces is only half that, but it's concentrated in a very small area. And we shouldn't kid ourselves to think, oh, maybe only some of the 70 or 75 spaces will go away. We've seen variance requests in the Board of Zoning Appeals for 1 or 2 spaces all the time. We should expect that over some period of time, over the next 5 or 10 years, every single one of these 70 or 75 spaces, or just about all but 5 perhaps, will be reallocated. We should be asking what that means. I would urge you to not adopt this proposal. We haven't put the thought into it, and I think that when we do put the thought into it, we will come to the conclusion that this is a bad idea. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to us? Mike Smeltzer.
Good evening, Mike Smeltzer, 18 West State Street. Point of order, if I could first. I thought this meeting was to establish a date for the public hearing. Is this in fact a public hearing, or is this?
This is a committee meeting.
Committee meeting. Okay. So this, depending on the vote tonight, would establish the date for the public hearing? Is that true?
If
or?
we decide to take this forward, we would have to schedule a public hearing that would occur before our vote.
Okay. All right. Just to recap, we have a Planning Commission recommendation, I think now for the 3rd time, to rezone this portion of Court. And that's based on analysis done by all of our taxpayer money collectively that was collected and spent on a $200,000+ analysis of what should happen with the growth in Athens. And when I purchased the building, I kind of thought, well, this makes sense. They're allocating all 4 blocks of Court to the downtown area, and so it seemed logical that that would be the case. And I began this process, I think, in December of '06 to get this done. So to answer the question of the individual, where is the analysis done? The analysis, I think, is found in the city planners, engineers, and folks that we hired with our input, and I believe that was a big deal to make sure all community members had some say in the steering committee and in the creation of that document, what's known as the Comprehensive Plan of Athens, in which I believe has been adopted at this point by council. Is that true? Okay. All right, so that's the analysis, that's how that occurred. I guess a few points of order. One is the noise, I guess, number one. Are there rules on the books about noise ordinances and about how to control noise in the downtown area or in the residential areas? Are those things in place? Are they being used? Anybody on council is free to answer that question, or the mayor?
We usually don't respond to questions, but when I was at the hearing concerning bronies, Lieutenant Gray said that if you're having a loudspeaker blaring out music, it's one kind of noise problem. But he did say that the bar noise on North Court Street was qualitatively and quantitatively different and almost impossible to enforce with our existing code.
Okay.
I mean, that was just part of his, that's the only thing I've heard about it. But I think otherwise the noise ordinance works reasonably well.
Okay. And that was with regard to bronies? Did you say?
Yes.
Okay.
And I wouldn't want you to think it's personal. I was just there because I was representing council.
No, I don't think that. I was going to mention the idea that I'm not sure if the members and community members are aware, but had council followed the initial 2 attempts at making the zoning aligned, bronies would not have been able to be built because of its proximity to Courtside, and that's a bar, and they couldn't have done that. So that clearly was, that affected sort of, I think, the folks here. They're concerned with the noise and so forth. So that's one, the noise, I think, is one issue. I'm very sympathetic. I don't know how to control it. I thought there were rules on the books in order to do that.
He said you couldn't do it.
Having said that, it is a city full of college kids, I might add. And to expect that to be a silent environment is a little bit naive, I think.
Silent?
Secondly is the idea of parking. We heard from Jim, who is also a business owner in the community, nearby, I might add. And I think that, I don't want to speak for him, but I would be surprised if he would ever give up his parking so that his clients didn't have a place to park. Nor would the commercial owners that own businesses and retail spots on Court Street and nearby. Why would they give up parking? Why would they turn this parking over so that their clients don't have a place to park? Their business owners, their customers, or customers rather, wouldn't have a place to park. So it's a market-driven idea, and evidently it's been on the books since 1969. Boy, 30-plus years have gone by. Seems like maybe time for a change. I'm not sure, but yes.
Didn't you eliminate parking in your place?
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
Did
Not
you get
that.
a variance?
I got a variance, and
Did
not
you
that.
what?
Not that was required for my use, for my commercial use.
Okay.
I didn't do that. Nor do I have to. I might add. I don't have to do that if I don't want to. So, as the business owner and as the owner of the building, I can decide ultimately, and knowing that we have to have commercial activity on that first floor. If I want people to come and frequent my business, I better be either a pedestrian business, or I better have some parking. And there aren't very many along that way. There's Cornwell, which I think we all know has plenty of parking right out front. Otherwise, they're I assume that's a business decision made so that they can have some clients and have them come in there. And I would be surprised if that changed, but again, I can't speak for someone else. I can just tell you that the market is going to drive whether or not we change our parking spaces. And if we have to have commercial activity on the first floor, those odds become much, much less. Okay? So that kind of addresses the parking space question, I suppose. Density, my question to Debbie is, if you haven't decided on a boundary, how did you know what to ask Steve in terms of where the 70 to 75 parking spaces that become available? Could you describe the boundaries that you used with him to produce those numbers?
We'll, I think, have our discussion when folks are done talking to us. I think this is getting into a lot more back and forth than we would traditionally do in a committee meeting.
Okay. Well, I mean, just a point of clarification so I can address the issue publicly. Do you know what that boundary was that you, I mean, I'm sure it was just a hypothetical, but do you know what it was? Or what it included? I think it would be give people a better idea of where the parking is available and where it's not.
We can talk, council can discuss it when we're in our discussion.
Okay, fair enough. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Where do you actually live? You gave the address. Do you live on East State Street?
No, that's West State Street.
West State
No,
Street.
I live on Coolville Ridge, which is in
okay.
Athens,
I'm just
but
asking, that's
a
all.
little further away.
Absolutely. If I remember this zoning change goes all the way back to like 91. I think the packet we have shows strategic plan of 91.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm trying to remember what the analysis was for that, but I don't think there was really the same analysis for parking or anything like that. I think it was just to
Okay.
smooth it out or something like that.
Okay, okay.
And I think the other discussion I've had recently with some people is the idea of zoning as a tool, and I think the letter I saw that came to us, I think from Mr. Sillery, is the idea of using it as a buffer zone, having a transition between residential. Although I think the other sections of the code say that's not really a good thing, but at the same time, it can be considered that.
Well, and I'm not sure the plan, the comprehensive plan, again, I got to come back to that because I'm not an expert. I don't know how to do this kind of thing. I just read that document. It's a lengthy one, and it talks about a lot of things and a lot of aspects that we all appreciate about Athens. And one thing it says, without very much question in black and white, is those 4 blocks ought to be considered the downtown area. And I think to all of us in the room, they are considered that. We do consider that the downtown. We would just like to be treated equally. The last block should be the same as the other 3. I mean,
Do you
it
think
just-
we
it
should
just makes
establish
sense.
the distance rule that was in existence, 500 feet away from the parking garage as
Okay.
a system as well? I mean, that used to be in the code.
Mhm.
It has to be a certain distance from the parking garage to be used,
I
rather
got
than the same zone.
Well, I'd have to look at that because I'm not real familiar with that,
Okay.
all right, or I would make a comment.
Okay, I'm just
Okay,
asking.
let's go ahead and have our discussion. And, oh, I think that there are 2 other folks who would like to talk to us. Larry? Okay. Elahu.
Elahu Gosney, 20 Fairview. I live on the near north side. I've been affected by businesses that have gone into the lower side of Court Street here. And really, we do need a balance. We need to be able to have commercial enterprise, but that can't be at the cost of residents not being able to sleep in their own bedrooms. So I think we really need to take into account allowing businesses to go into these areas, but we need to make sure that the property owners that are directly affected by the parking and the noise problems have a say too. Thanks.
Okay. Larry?
Do you think we should be changing the noise ordinance laws to actually do some kind of enforcement for general noise?
I think it might be a good idea to have some sort of ordinance to regulate outdoor eating and dining establishments, drinking and dining establishments that are close to residential areas.
Okay, just wondering.
Okay. Larry?
My name is Larry Payne. I've been asked to speak for the Uptown Business Association. I'm the co-chair of that group. First of all, the Uptown Business Association does care about the quality of life in the near neighborhood areas of the Uptown. But the AUBA also cares about preserving the uniqueness of the historic district Uptown. And concerning some of the statements tonight about don't do this before the county planner, this is something new. This has been in our records from the Uptown Business Association for 20 years now. So this proposal is something that we've gone on record many times of being in favor of. About the concern of noise, we understand that. And in effect, if the B2D had been in effect, some of these problems would not have been in existence, is the feeling of our group. We don't think the proposal is totally based just on usage of the garage. Like I said, we're concerned about the preservation of the historical district. And I think it would help our group, Debbie, if you could give us a breakdown of those 70 parking places. Because I know just on top of my head and what I drove by there on the way here tonight, I know there's at least 12 at the county museum, which we don't think is going to change. Public defender office is another 12. Cornwall Jewelers, and I know nobody can guarantee what's going to happen, but Cornwall's has been around for 140, 60 years, or I believe maybe even 160 years now. I know there's at least 5 places out front, and I think another 5 in the back for employees. But we don't know what the total breakdown is. But just if those cases are pretty close, that's 34. That's half of it right there. So from the Uptown Business Association, if you could provide that with us, we could talk to the businesses and would be happy to do that. So we would urge you to accept the Planning Commission recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I guess a couple other things that I would mention. I think the comprehensive plan is a document that has a lot of different ideas in it. And one of the things that was discussed by the steering committee before it was forwarded to the Planning Commission and then to Council is there is a need to prioritize, and there are things that can be in conflict with one another within the plan. It's not like it's a document where we could do everything that's in there. So there is still a role for the Planning Commission and for City Council. And so I think it is entirely appropriate for us to be engaged in this discussion about the issues that are important to residents and business owners in the city. So I would just kind of, preface our discussion by saying that, and I will type up a list of what I've been told about parking places and email it around to folks. But I'd like to open the discussion. Nancy.
Well, I would like to ask two questions for additional information. One of them is, I went to the State Department of Liquor Control website to find out if local zoning ordinances could now override liquor licenses. And I found no evidence that it could. In other words, I don't think that if checked or tested, our zoning code limitations would be upheld. Because I can remember from my experience on the zoning board, maybe with even when Jim was on. And so, it was absent any information. The only input we have is to check them once a year and see if they're doing their job and not having too many underage drinkers. So traditionally in Ohio, the State Department of Liquor Control preempts local zoning, just as it does with hazardous waste facilities and power plants and some other public. And so if that's changed, I'd be perfectly willing to admit then, oh, well, maybe those two wouldn't have been there. But I don't think it's changed. I think it's still the case that the State Department of Liquor Control will allow them, within the reasons that they have, 500 feet of a church, blah, blah. There are certain things they require, but I think that is a standard, unless it's and I could not find it on the website. I read the whole doggone thing. And it doesn't say local zoning can affect the placement at all. And the second thing I have is from a few years ago. And this is one introduced by Ed Baum, Chair, Planning and Development Committee, at the end of the year in 2001, about 5 years ago. The Planning Commission at that time recommended an amended plat of the Les Cornwell residential commercial plant PUD up on North Court Street. And that amendment actually allowed, this is quoting from our minutes, Les Cornwell explained that the construction of the complex at 95 Court Street was completed in 1993. For nearly 10 years, he worked to rent the ground floor. After failing to rent the commercial space, he opened Courtside Pizza in 1997, and most of the floor in Building 2 and 3 was used for storage. In other words, there was not enough commercial demand in that area to use the area as a commercial entity. So in 2001, 5 years ago or so, 5 years and 3 months ago, we allowed him then to start to use the first floor as apartments. So going to a commercial zone in an area 5 years ago, there was evidence that there wasn't demand in that very area for commercial use on the ground floor, which would be required now he was required by virtue of his PUD. And this now would require everyone to have it. So I just think that's a piece of information that's very important, because we're talking about primary uses being commercial and secondary being residential. Just a piece of information.
Carol?
I think that it would be beneficial if we had a sincere discussion about the possibility of going back to the 500-yard distance from the parking garage. I certainly think that relieves some of the worries concerning the parking. The way I see it, there are two concerns here that are real, connected with what we're trying to do. I mean, there are a lot of concerns that really aren't related to what we're doing. The two things are the distance of bars from residential, and I'm quite sure that the end of Court Street is more than 200 yards from, up on the hill, from my house. But I do think that parking garage, and it'll take more time, we've been doing this for years, who cares,
Right.
But to go back and look at that 500 yards again,
I'd like to, I think that's a really good idea, and I would like to add that we should put it as a line on the map, because I've seen different zoning inspectors use different lines. And so if this is indeed a way around this quandary we're in, that would be a way to do it. And so beyond that, and
It certainly seems like a starting point.
yeah, and it would have to go back through the planning commission then.
Right.
So,
Why?
Another thing that I thought about related to that, because a lot of this has been discussion about noise late at night, is whether we want to look, whether we could have any zoning recommendation about when there are sidewalk tables and chairs. You know, if there's any way to set a time limit, you know, like after 10 o'clock or after 11 o'clock, that activity is done for the night. I don't know if that's something that we could consider.
I tried
That's
this.
separate from this
Bojinka.
discussion. I was going to say, that would be in addition
Separate.
to,
Yeah.
or that's a separate issue, right?
Yeah,
I think you ought to check with liquor control and see if we can do that,
okay.
because I don't think you can.
Jim?
No, I was going to say what Bojinka said, that that's a separate issue, but I think that what you're speaking about is some limit on the time of outdoor cafes would be a very reasonable action for us to take. And I don't know if we address it, you know, we may have to be creative in dealing with the liquor license, but that's one way to look at it. And I agree with Carol that we should probably look at disconnecting the commercial parking space uses from necessarily the whole B2D zone. The B2D zone was created before this 500-foot went into effect, and then the 500 expanded, and now it's just assumed that that goes with the zoning designation, but it doesn't necessarily, I don't think. And so going back to the original line may be a good thing to pursue.
Other members? Paul?
I'm looking at the packet we got, this is 11/27/06, which included, I see, 3 pages from the strategic plan of 1991 from NBBJ. And page 54 of it talks about the downtown business district. It talks about downtown Athens has a special character, partly historical and aesthetic, partly functional. The city has already recognized its uniqueness by creating special categories as the downtown in its sign ordinance. That special treatment should be extended to other aspects of the zoning code in the creation of a downtown business district. And this includes, of course, to be expanded, which was discussed earlier, expand to all 3 blocks of Court Street and appropriate portions of its court streets. But also says include a new set of bulk controls designed to preserve the unity of character as well as promote public health and safety. So when you start talking about rezoning this, we might want to be talking about also, as Jim's saying, changing some of the aspects, whether it's parking, whether it's outdoor seating, and other aspects of this. So we're looking. I tend to want to look at it as a lump rather than pieces of it.
Okay. Bojinka?
Just a clarification. So are you saying that the specifications in these zones we're looking at revisiting? Is that what you're saying?
Right here.
Well, 2007, but that one and maybe others.
Reinstating that one.
How about the other issues, like how late people
Yes.
sit at outdoor cafes, is not included in any of this, right?
No.
No, adding some new
Right, so that's what I mean. So you're looking at revising the requirements in each zoning category, right?
In B2D.
Just in B2D.
Just in B2D.
Right.
Requesting that the planning commission recommend it to us, actually.
Jim?
That's what I was originally raising my hand for. Were those limitations, those delineated activities within the zone, were they added by planning commission activity, or just did council just vote on an ordinance that said
I
that.
doubt we did.
It looks to me like it was a zoning requirement
Was it?
that
Okay.
was changed.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, I didn't, I thought otherwise, but
During
we,
the
but
changes.
we need to find out.
okay. Well, it sounds to me like there's pretty broad support for going back to the 500 feet and actually having that mapped, have our GIS folks do a map with a line on it so that it's clear for other people who have to interpret that rule, exactly what we're talking about, right? Paul?
Again, the discussion of how many spaces, commercial spaces, are actually affected by this. I'd be interested in seeing that map as well. I know
Map the
Larry-
spaces?
Well, Larry brought it up. How many numbers are we talking about? And actually, I wouldn't mind actually, and I know it'd be a lot of work, is find out how many actually residential parking spaces we have up there too.
Okay.
Just so
I can run through the list, and this was Steve off the top of his head. He did not look at all the permits to see exactly what's required.
Okay.
But if you want me to run through this, what he believes is required in that area, Courtside has 7 that are required. 18 West State has 14 spaces, 9 are required for commercial. Brony's has somewhere between 7 and 10. He wasn't entirely sure on that one. Cornwell's has 10 total. He doesn't think those are all required for commercial use. He thought Historical Society had 10, Public Defender 4. Ellie Barstow has 5 or 6 that are somewhere nearby that are deed restricted for commercial use.
Yes.
Wharton's office has 4 that are for commercial use. Magic Video has 10. They have other spaces, but they are not all required for commercial use. And Valentor has 3 or 4. So those are the numbers that Steve came up with. I'm not sure where they're all located, and I don't know how difficult it would be to actually map that. It might be possible to put the businesses that are required to have parking, on the map. We could probably put the number of spaces they're required to have, but it may not show exactly where those spaces are.
It's going to solve the problem.
I think it's time to identify them.
Okay. So we,
All the GIS possibilities that we have now should be.
Maybe we don't have enough.
okay.
What did you say?
I think it's time to identify them.
Yeah.
With all the GIS capabilities we have, it should not be that difficult.
So map the 500 feet. Map the spaces that are currently required for commercial use. Some of those businesses have variances already, I think. Jim?
When you're saying map the spaces that are required, you're speaking about the entire proposed area?
Zoning it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Change. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Bojinka?
Just want to clarify this. Under this zoning, it says all commercial parking at garage, right? So all of the commercial spaces that you mentioned would no longer have to be commercial. Is that correct? That's, okay, I think that's a very significant issue.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess it's worth exploring this if people are generally supportive of the idea of making the change. If people are not generally supportive of that, council action on this recommendation could be to say, we're not taking it out of committee, we don't want to do it. So I think we should answer that question before we spend time and money doing the mapping, because we do have a contract with OGAR to do this mapping. So do people want to pursue this?
You're taking a straw poll.
You're taking a straw poll. on
Am
this
I?
thing. You really are, because people have a right over 3 readings to be swayed.
Okay.
And to petition their council members and to bring forth their input. And to do in committees straw polling, which we've all heard over the years that this is kind of tough. And I certainly realize why you want to, because I think it's a good reason, but I'd be careful
Well,
one at a time doing this.
I can ask my committee members if
Yes,
they
you can.
want to bring this out of committee.
Yeah.
I don't think it sounds like we're ready for first reading because we may have some conditions that we are wanting to put on this?
Ready to come out of committee.
Not ready to bring it out of committee. Are you interested in doing so, committee members?
I think that's appropriate.
Interested in bringing it out of committee or
Not
following?
Monday, but
Eventually.
Yes, I think we should I think it is our responsibility at this point to take some action with regards to this proposal which we received from the planning commission.
I would like to explore those two issues, the liquor control permit, and I would also like to know the parking and the other thing, because there, as somebody pointed out, there was precious little justification for doing it, and I suspect the 500 feet rule will make it a wash anyway. And then the main objection will be, 500 feet, I think, will put all of them still having to have parking on premises.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I'd like to see.
Okay.
And
So
then
we-
by then, we'll decide whether we can send it back to planning commission, ask them to expedite it, and,
Okay.
okay?
And I did hear a concern that when we went through and did the bulk control change around the height, that took some time. And I think a feeling that if we do say that we need another change to happen, that we bring things through concurrently at that point. So if we say that we want to go back to the 500 feet, we should do the 500 feet and the zoning change concurrently, I think, just, because this has taken some time already. Carol?
But on that point, the height change, I think, was an important step
Yes.
to another concern that we had, and we've taken care of that one. So I just would like to see us fix it instead of throwing the whole idea out.
Okay.
That's what we're doing, fixing it.
We'll get some mapping done and have
on this
that
committee?
information. Okay. I have one miscellaneous item that landed in my box, if I can find it after I just shuffled all these papers around, about demolition permits. This is a question from Steve Pearson. That the old Athens City Code said that demolition permits would not be issued until the applicant furnished the Director of Public Safety with proof of effective liability insurance in the sum of $100,000 per individual, $300,000 per incident, and $50,000 in property insurance, with an exemption if they were demolishing a one-story accessory building, like a shed in their backyard or something. So the current code says that demolition permits require proof of effective liability insurance as determined by ordinance. And it looks like there is not separately determined by ordinance. So, I don't know when that was changed, but I would like to suggest that we put the amounts back in. Paul?
Okay, you just mentioned having proof of liability for demolishing a shed. Okay, no? Or anything?
No,
except-
you wouldn't have to. That's
You
an
wouldn't have
exception.
to. Oh, that's the exception, okay. That's what I
It's,
wanted to know, okay.
the exception, no proof of insurance is needed for demolition of a one-story accessory building less than 576 square feet in area.
Okay.
How they came up with 576,
That's a shed.
I don't know.
Okay.
So we could demolish the rest.
Can we go
of
ahead and bring
separate,
this forward to put the amounts back in, just to provide that guidance? Paul?
The next question is, are these amounts adequate since it's an old law?
I will check on what other municipalities have,
Okay.
so that if this is nowhere near what other municipalities have, then we'll fine tune the amounts before
Okay.
we start reading it.
Okay. no
But we'll
problem.
plan on having this up next week. Okay. Any other miscellaneous for planning and development? Then we're done.
All right, thank you. Transportation Committee, best for last, obviously. First item is Stewart Street sidewalk. Essentially, I just wanted to update council on the progress of that. Assessment notices went out, and the property owners have until May 25th to object. In writing, is that right, Debbie? They haven't to object May 25th in writing. And I've also been instructed that Andy has given them until July 15th to construct if they do object. And that's up to code, up to city code. So that's the update on Stewart Street sidewalk. Any questions on that project?
Good.
Finally, right? Okay.
Good. Good job.
Next item on the agenda is bicycle safety. Again, we had our second meeting tonight at 6 o'clock before council, which I think went very well. We kind of came up with, as an objective for the meeting, a mission statement as to what this subcommittee is going to be providing as a group and what we foresee as how we are going to accomplish things in our group. And we kind of compiled a very lengthy bullet list of items which we're going to work on over the course of the next week or so on formulating a 1 to 2 sentence, or maybe like 1, 2, 3 bullet on what the subcommittee is going to be providing as a group. Essentially, safety, education, and enforcement implementation are all kind of the key points of the bicycle safety subcommittee. In addition, we will be having another meeting on May 29th. That's a Tuesday because May 28th is Memorial Day. So May 29th at 5:30 p.m. It was requested that it be a little earlier to give more time for these meetings because people are very energized and energetic and want to participate. So 5:30, May 29th, Mayor's Conference Room, same time, or same place, excuse me. Any questions about bicycle safety subcommittee? Okay. Is there a transportation task force meeting this week?
I would say no.
Okay. Okay, I have a couple of miscellaneous items. First one is about the business fair that Amanda Estock from Student Senate has contacted us about. It is my understanding that she's been working with Larry on this, and that she's also talked to Ray in terms of where the better location would be. And after suggestions and discussion, she has since moved the street location between Union and Washington, that block of Court Street, to house what she projects up to maybe 200 businesses to come in and set up booths and talk to students and any new people to the area about businesses in the uptown area as well as throughout the entire city. Also, the city of Athens is going to have a booth there as well, if for no other reason but to talk about bicycle safety stuff and educating incoming residents to Athens. And that is, again, going to be on September 8th. Is that right? September 8th. Right now, and like I said, she talked to Ray about this. The event is from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., and she said that she's only going to need an hour for setup and cleanup, but I want to double check that with Ray and make sure that's enough time for that. So after I get that figured out, I'll be bringing that to first reading, possibly next week. Any questions about that? All right. Oh, I have another, one other miscellaneous is what was given to me in the last week, which I have not had the time to go through and read, and I'll pass a copy around to everybody. It's about a traffic code update, I guess you would call it, about parades. So I'm just asking that council read over this. It's part of the code 70440. Traffic code.
What part of the traffic?
Processions and parades. So there's a lot there. So if council could just read over it.
Have one already?
And then we can discuss it again.
Are you discriminating against Paul?
No, Bill took a copy.
Bill, did you take?
I didn't make enough copies.
You don't want your president to know what's going on?
No, I do. I just.
I'm sorry.
Debbie doesn't know.
I wrote your names on them.
Oh.
You stole
I
mine.
took
I stole
Debbie
Paul's.
Let's see.
Okay.
So I guess I'm just asking council to take a look at this, and then we'll proceed in making the addition to the code. And I met with Andy today for about 2 hours prior to our bicycle meeting, and yes, Nancy, Central Avenue will be paved.
Yes, there is a
Rest
Santa Claus.
assured,
Thank
Central
you.
Avenue will be paved.
Thank you. Because he's saving money.
Because
of
he's saving money because of,
ODOT, right?
yes.
Hooper Street.
Right, because of the Hooper,
Which is really good news.
oh, it's great news, yeah. So there's money there to do the Central Avenue
Good.
first.
Yippee, thank you.
That's all I had for miscellaneous, I think. Yes, anybody have anything? I did that in 9 minutes, by the way.
Beautiful.
Excellent.
Any questions? Larry?
Labor Committee Chair. You done?
No, Larry's got something.
Next Monday.
Larry Payne, Chairman of the ATCO Governing Board. I'd like to thank Andy Stone administration for meeting with us tomorrow. And just like to bring this to council's attention. We talked about this briefly in the past. I know Stewart Street was a long time coming, but we have some serious issues on Stimson Avenue for people who need wheelchairs. And this is something we've been discussing for the last couple of years, and we're going to meet with Andy tomorrow, like I said. And we have a list of about 2 pages of recommendations of items that we hopefully could be corrected. So I'm sure Andy will give you an update, or we will too. And just urge council to, if possible, be supportive of those issues.
I think we talked about this last week, and there's a, Jim and I are both planning to go. I think when Andy goes to look at those, he's going to meet with folks at ATCO. Is that tomorrow? At 3? So tomorrow at 3 o'clock, Andy Stone is going to be walking with ATCO employees to look at those, and some of us are going with him. You're welcome to join us.
Debbie, some time ago, like 2 years ago, we were talking about that this would be part of a streetscape. Whatever happened to that?
Some of us.
There was an RFP, but I don't know what happened beyond that. Maybe the mayor can tell us.
It was very expensive.
Okay.
That was the university plan? Yeah.
I think most of these are focusing on what the private businesses or property owners have sidewalk-wise around there.
Okay.
For quite a few of them.
All right.
I did have one more miscellaneous. If you remember last year, we, not this past street tour, but the year before, we went down to the garage and we looked at 2 trucks. We looked at the 113 and the 120. I can't remember which one's a sign truck and which one's the yard waste truck. But they look very similar to me. But I promised pictures, or at least so we could see, what we did in terms of purchasing new trucks and the updates that we made. So I'm going to pass the pictures around. The old ones are on top and the new ones are on the bottom. So I'll pass those around. Those are the 2 different trucks that we bought as a result of last year's ordinance. And this year, Andy has stated that the 2-ton truck, that we need to purchase a new one. And I asked him for a number, and he said about $105,000 for that truck. So I'll get more information from him on the necessity and everything and bring that to council. But I just wanted to mention that to you, that we're in need of another truck. That's all that I have. Adjourned.
Old ones, new ones.
Next, the end of the agenda.